Hi, I'm Ben.
And I'm Josh.
And this is the Bad and Magic Podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things. And welcome to episode 37.
The number 37 is so appropriate for this episode, and I'll tell you why. During my extensive, elaborate research that I do the 15 minutes before the podcast starts, I discovered that the number 37 is very weird. It is a weird number when it comes to math. And I've got 3 reasons that I think it's weird. I'm going to share it with you. You ready?
All right, yeah.
Okay. So the first one is just kind of quaint. Like anything by itself is just like, whatever. But when it comes in multiples like this, then it freaks me out. But the first one is like, oh, no big deal. So the number 37, if you switch the digits, is the number 73. Uh-huh. But if you take 37 and you add 37 together again, so 2 times 37, you get 74. So 73 and 74 both contained within the number 37. Yeah, who cares?
No, they aren't. It's one off.
No, it's 37 plus 37 is 74. And then 37 switched to 73. So it's 73 and 74 both contained. They're next to each other. They're adjacent.
Okay.
Like I said, when you talk about just one of them, it's no big deal. Now, the next one is even weirder. If you have a 3-digit number that is divisible by 37, you can make another number divisible by 37 by taking the first digit and moving it to the end of the number. For example, 925 divided by 37 is 25. Uh-huh. Now, if you take the 9 and put it at the end of that, you get 259, which is also divisible by 37. It's 7. And then if you take the 2 and put it back at the end, it's 592, which is also divisible by 37. It's 16.
Okay.
You just have this little conveyor belt of numbers going in a circle that are all divisible by 37.
And that concludes the Number File podcast.
I've got one more.
Go.
This one's my favorite. So if you take any number between 1 and 9 and you multiply it by 37, like you take the number, you add it to itself two times. This sounds stupid, but when you see it written out, it's awesome. So 37 times, like for example, 37 times 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 111, 111. 37 times 2 plus 2 plus 2 equals 222, 222. 37 times 5 plus 5 plus 5 equals 555. And it works for every single digit number. 1, 2.
Why didn't you just lead with that one?
Well, this is what I'm saying. One thing by itself can be just an anomaly, but like 37 is weird. So 37
just sounds like this obscure pride number, but it's actually kind of cool.
Yeah, there's a bunch of weird crap about number 37, just like there's going to be a bunch of weird crap about this episode of the podcast.
Well, before we get into the weird crap, let's do some bad at English.
Excellent.
Okay, so this is a phrase I'd heard frequently said. It kind of has 2 meanings that feel like they're the same. The phrase is trot on as normal. To trot on as normal either means to pretend that everything's okay when it isn't, or it means when you know that everything's not okay, that you're making an effort to go on with your life. Like if you were mourning the death of a loved one and someone says, "How are you doing?" You say, "I'm just trying to trot on as normal."
Or if your kids are asking you why you're watching C-SPAN live on a Wednesday and kind of freaking out and like, "Oh, well, I'm just trying to trot on as normal."
Yeah, or you tell them to just carry on with what they're doing. Just trot on as normal.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, like the poster you've all seen from the World War II propaganda, "Stay calm and carry on." It could also say "trot on as normal."
Yeah, but then it doesn't rhyme.
All right, so let's get to the elephant in the room. Josh, we're recording on the 9th of January. Let's talk about why we're trying to trot on as normal with everything that's going on in the world right now. It feels like it's only been 2 weeks since we talked last, but it feels like it's been a year.
Yeah, a lot has happened in the 2 weeks since we talked last, since Christmas, since this lovely time of the holidays and togetherness.
Yeah, so like another 20,000 people have died of coronavirus. There's been an insurrection in the United States of America,
and attempted. This is very important for history. We are recording, as we are recording. It was an attempted insurrection. Maybe before the podcast is released or we record the next episode, there will be an actual insurrection.
As of this point, it has been unsuccessful.
Right. I remember on when I I've completely forgotten about everything except this that happened because it was just it's such a huge thing. It felt like I was watching 9/11 again.
Yeah. I could not look away from the TV. It was spellbinding to just see the cameras and the mob kind of gathering on the steps of the Capitol, and then hear the kind of scattered reports of people inside and what.
Well, so Nicole and I had been reading articles that there was going to be some kind of made up fussiness about the political situation or whatever, and so we actually had C-SPAN up like in the morning around lunchtime to watch the proceedings. We were going to watch.
Did you understand the constitutional impetus for what business they were conducting that day?
Yes, they were rubber stamping everything that had already been done.
Yes, but it's required by the Constitution on the 6th of January. It has to be the 6th of January.
Right. And it was just going to be a bunch of political theater. And we knew that going into it. And that's why
there was several politicians that had said in advance they were going to object, and then they'd get their chance to speak, and then it would get rubber stamped as expected.
Exactly. And so we had C-SPAN up on one of our monitors in the room. And then it was funny because we saw the proceedings come to like a crawl and then a halt as we heard some distant voice, one of those off microphone voices shouting from somewhere in the room, and everybody was looking up.
So you were watching it live from on the floor of the House.
Yes. And what was really interesting is that Nancy Pelosi gets escorted away. And then after that, they like kind of shut down and like started taking a recess. And then we started hearing the reports from the C-SPAN. So if you've never watched C-SPAN, it's a not-for-profit, and they don't have the world's greatest news reporters.
There's no director like, all right, now change to camera 3. That's got the best angle on things.
That's right. And so some news is coming out like, oh, there's some kind of disruption at the Capitol. We're getting information that comes in. We're like, oh, and so we paused that, and then we pulled up CNN, which actually had exterior shots of what was happening. And then that's when we realized, that's why they shut it all down.
That's what I was watching, was CNN and Fox News and the like, where they were showing it from the exterior, where it's just rabid mob kind of whipping itself into a frenzy.
Well, can we say whipping itself into a frenzy? I think it was whipped into a frenzy and then turned loose.
Okay, so in typical Donald Trump fashion, he had interpreted this constitutional requirement to rubber stamp the result of the duly certified election on the 6th of January as yet another chance for them to undo it and reverse it in his favor. And so he'd held a political rally that morning with these people that were already in Washington, D.C., and told them in every way he could without actually saying it that they needed to do this.
Yeah, honestly, if you listen to parts of his speech, it's very clear language. Like, we are going to go walk down to the Capitol right now, down the street.
We have to be strong, and we have to show them.
We can't let them take this country away. And like, just all of the words without actually saying, hey, go burn it down.
Yeah.
Anyway, like, so
it was comedic in the way it was carried out. If it wasn't also deadly, there were 5 people that died. But I mean, at one point you've got like groundskeeper Willie standing on the lectern in the House of Representatives.
And this is I was watching this as it was happening, and all I could think of was this stuff doesn't happen in America. This is
it does today.
This is the stuff you watch on YouTube of these like third world countries that has Congress that get into like those giant hockey brawls across the aisle and stuff. Like this kind of nonsensical, violent disruption doesn't happen here because I don't know, because all of us on the inside, we just want to feel like we're better than that, and clearly we're not.
There were shirtless guys with coonskin caps and buffalo horns. There were people carrying Confederate and Nazi flags. It was just lunacy.
Stephen Colbert, I think, said it the best when he said, you never see the Confederate flag at a really positive event. Like, whenever you see the Confederate flag, it's always in the circumstances of, ooh, that shouldn't be there.
Yeah. And it was like that, and it was surreal. They bust through the doors, and the cops just kind of step out of the way and let them in, and then they walk through the velvet ropes, right down the middle of the entryway, and then start spilling into offices and breaking windows and doors and taking souvenirs and selfies and videos. And it looked a little bit clowny and stuff until you start hearing the gunshots and the trampling and the other stuff that was going on. that wasn't necessarily on the live feeds.
Yeah. I mean, I try to stay as apolitical as possible. Obviously, I have clear political leanings and stuff like this, but without discussing like the merits to any of the previous stuff that happened. Like, let's just ignore what happened in the background, ignore what stirred it all up, and just look at what took place. There's two key takeaways for me from this whole thing. And the first one is somewhere, I feel like in the last 30 or 40 years, we have devolved, like the political process has kind of started to break down to where I don't know if we're more polarized or if we're just exposed to more echo chambers because of social media. But at some point, like, civil discourse stopped being an option. It feels like we can't talk to people of opposing viewpoints without getting into some kind of an argument or a conflict over it. Like, we can't have a discussion about our different political leanings without it escalating to levels like we saw on Wednesday.
Yeah, there's something fundamental that's happening underneath that, what you're saying, and where there's like this, it isn't just a disputation on the interpretation of the facts, it's like a disputation of the facts themselves.
But as without even, we can't even talk about it. For some reason, all those people that marched on the Capitol, they felt like that was their only alternative. They felt like they weren't being represented, that their voices weren't being heard, and that the normal political process was not worth their time and effort. Instead, it was better to storm into the building with violence.
Yeah, and if you watch any of the news clips of those people that were being interviewed by the reporters as they were going in about what their intent was to lay hands on the lawmakers. You know, they were talking about hanging Mike Pence by a noose. They were talking about getting, Nancy Pelosi, and they had handcuffs in their possession. I mean, they intended to. We saw a live lynch mob.
Yeah. So, but like I'm saying, my takeaway from that is we have got to fix the process so people like that feel like they're being represented, feel like they're being heard, and feel like they can engage the political process in a way that isn't violent. They're completely disenfranchised. Like, we can point fingers on where it came from, but there's no single source. Something about the mechanics of the entire system across the entire board. And honestly, I feel like I can somewhat relate to what they're feeling because, like we've talked about in this podcast multiple times, I feel like I don't have very much agency in the much larger political stage in our country. What can I do as a single voter that's going to make a difference? So, like, I get where they're coming from, even though I completely disagree with their conclusions and methods.
Okay, that was very sympathetic of you. That was a big theme of the book we're going to talk about later on.
Well, now I don't want to sound like I'm sympathetic to these idiots. So let me.
No. Don't take it back. I like that point. I want to marinate in that for a minute because I've also kind of considered the dilemma of this, like you said, the echo chamber that they live in, where they're just reciting false information. Like, as soon as the incursion happened on the Capitol building itself, this narrative almost immediately started to propagate on Twitter, on Facebook, that these were not conservatives that had infiltrated the Capitol. These were not Trump supporters that were rioting. They were leftist operatives posing as conservatives in order to break the traditional narrative that only liberals riot for their causes.
So, listen, Ben, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck and it's carrying a Trump flag, like, we all know who these people were.
Yeah, but we've also seen this kind of information ops. It would be easy enough for, a Russian spy or a liberal operative to grab a Trump flag and go say, let's start a riot, and then the rest is history. But the fact is, this isn't the truth. These people are dyed-in-the-wool, true blue, established conservatives. They have social media presences, they have histories, they have followers, and it's very clear that they were who they were. And yet this narrative gained so much momentum that has been just a drumbeat by my Trump-supporting friends that I love and adore, that I interact with mostly on Facebook. That no, they do not represent us. This wasn't true. These were Antifa. These were operatives from the other side trying to make us look bad.
And this is part of the discourse problem, because then if you were to counter the argument and say, like, okay, well, the way that these supporters don't represent you, like from my perspective, I can say, like, oh, well, Bernie Sanders and the radical super hardcore left don't represent me. And that, I feel like that message doesn't get accepted by the other side either. It does.
Yeah, they just lump you all together.
Yeah, both sides do.
You're right, and it doesn't help for me to lump them in with those people. It just makes you feel not understood and not heard.
So I don't know. That's my take. My first takeaway from that is somewhere along the line the system broke, and the right and the left can't even talk to each other anymore without throwing fists.
Yeah.
The second point that I wanted to make was the response and the preparation beforehand by law enforcement officials and security for the different national monuments. I think there's nobody that in the world that hasn't read these kinds of comparisons now, where people have been talking about how DC police geared up for BLM protests beforehand with full riot gear and National Guard activated and full like assault weapons out in the public, and then but then we get this ravenous mob of conservatives, and there's no extra actions taken, and they walked into the building.
They wouldn't activate the guard. They weren't pre-positioned. They weren't geared up.
And there's the hypocrisy around that. It just drives me nuts. And the I don't know if it's the inability to recognize or
who are the hypocrites. I've seen a little bit of anecdotal stuff where I've seen cameras standing right next to the line where the protesters are up against the cops, and they're saying things like, "Hey man, I support Blue Lives Matters. You don't want to get in our way today, do you? You're sympathetic to what we're doing here, right? Just step out of the way." Like that kind of stuff going on right at the front line.
It doesn't. I mean, what does that make it better? Does that justify?
No, it doesn't. But it is why it's not just for one cause you bring in the military, and for the other cause you just step out of the way and let them waltz in.
Is it because the Black Lives Matter movement was predominantly about police brutality and systemic racism?
Yes.
Because it was almost like they were protesting, like the police, and that's why the police took offense.
Right.
So, this is so politically charged. It's hard to discuss. But
you're right. There was a very distinct difference in the way that this was policed, and that's being looked into.
Yes, it is. And I want to point out the most egregious differences was that our beloved president for the next week, in the BLM protests, he was constantly using just hate and vitriol to describe these people, and constantly talking about more law enforcement and they all need to go to jail and we need to prosecute them to the full extent of the law. And then for the most part, yes, there were some rioting with the Black Lives Matter movement. I get that, but that is not indicative or representative of the entire movement. There were many more protests that were completely peaceful the entire time, including the one they went to.
As if the president needed another in his daily opportunities to be a hypocrite. There's this phrase now that people use on social media, there's always a tweet, where you can just have him tweeting against himself. He had, when the BLM protesters were out and they were becoming unruly, he was talking about force and strength and putting down the protesters and doing everything necessary to restore peace and order. And then when it was people that were out there supposedly supporting, what he'd asked them to do, he was just like, we love you and be nice.
Well, yeah, and that's the hypocrisy I wanted to point out. But I would like to say there are no longer any tweets. There will never be any more tweets ever again. And I'm very happy about that.
So, it's funny that I mentioned to you that I just recently finished reading the Count of Monte Cristo. Because if you remember, the Count of Monte Cristo was set in the mid-1800s, right when, or 1700s? Crap, I can't remember. Anyway, when Napoleon had just been deposed. And there was a very similar political environment swirling around Napoleon Bonaparte as there is around Donald Trump. He'd risen in this very precipitous manner to a great position of power, had had a great degree of success, and then had completely fallen out of favor and was ultimately sent in exile. And the reason that Edmond Dantes was sent to prison was because he was falsely associated with Napoleon Bonaparte as a sympathizer.
Yeah, and I mean that's a good parallel you can draw with your book.
But the thing they were doing was they'd sent Napoleon away because they couldn't execute him, and they couldn't really, but they had to get him out of power. But he still had this influence from afar because he could write letters or talk to people. And that's this idea surrounding Trump's access to Facebook and Twitter and, and other outlets where he can just kind of, in an unfiltered way, communicate directly with his sympathizers. And it was causing violence. It was causing people to die. And finally, people like Apple and Google and Twitter and Facebook are saying, no, we have the right to decide who uses our platform and for what, and you cannot use it for this.
Yeah, I would like to think it came from an altruistic sense of, just sheer morality. Like, this is wrong, and we as a company do not stand for this kind of thing. But I guarantee it came straight from the legal departments. Like, you need to kick him off the platform before people start suing us for giving him a voice.
Maybe.
That's the cynical side of me.
I mean, there's other part. I mean, so I don't know if you've heard of this, but there's this alternative to Facebook out there called Parler.
I have heard of that.
That is purporting themselves as an alternative to Facebook and trying to drum up business solely based on the angle of, hey, we won't filter your speech. We won't prevent your freedom of speech. And today, Apple computers delisted it from the App Store.
Google did the same thing. Yeah, because that's what it was. The whole platform was pitching itself as a free speech alternative almost exclusively for right-wing conservatives.
Right.
So my wife is a history major in college, and she's taught me a lot about history. And what's interesting is she said a quote probably a few weeks ago that has stuck with me, and I like bringing it back up and drawing parallels to it. And she said that history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. Mm. And a lot of what we've seen in the last year, and especially what happened this week, rhymes very much with Germany in 1939. Like right before the rise of a very charismatic individual that was ultra right-wing conservative, right before his devout followers started defying the rule of law in the name of taking their country back, to the point where like violence and like free speech was being quashed. It was just, these things are scary to me because I have read these accounts, and I it's like you can plot this on a graph and we're headed in the same trajectory, and I don't like that.
Well, I would like to say that this podcast just demonstrated Godwin's Law. Are you familiar with Godwin's Law?
I am not familiar with Godwin's Law.
Oh, great. Godwin's Law is an internet adage asserting that, quote, as an online discussion grows longer, the probability of comparison involving Nazis or Hitler approaches 1.
That's it. Episode 37. We've been talking long enough. It took 37
episodes of the Bad at Magic podcast for us to demonstrate the certainty of Godwin's Law.
I'm not saying that Trump is Hitler, but I'm saying what he is doing rhymes with Hitler.
All right, I have something I need to show you that's going to completely change this discussion.
This discussion we're having about the failed insurrection?
Yes. I just sent you an image in our chat there in Skype, and I want you to look at it.
Okay, these are lab results for somebody that is positive for, is this COVID-19?
Yes, those are my lab results.
Ben! You got the Rona? What happened?
So not only was there an insurrection this week, but I also contracted coronavirus.
Oh, this could be our last episode. I'm so sad.
So that's from Thursday. I started experiencing symptoms 10 days ago.
When you were home?
Yes, before I left to go home.
You were the one that were exposed to the guy in your office, and you talked incessantly. You would not drop the point of, we didn't even high five. He was all the way over there. We were both wearing masks, and she got completely blowing it off. And then you come down with the coronavirus. I'm all right. There's no sympathy anymore. I am shaking with rage.
I wanted this moment to be unfiltered for our listening audience because I wanted you to just lash out. I felt like I deserved it because I feel like such an idiot.
So hang on. Hang on, we're not done chastising your stupidity yet.
Carry on as long as you feel it's necessary.
What symptoms exactly did you experience before you got on an airplane?
Okay, so since you were talking earlier about having sympathy and understanding, I hope you can extend a little bit. So as you pointed out, a month prior, I had plane tickets to fly home for Thanksgiving, and I canceled my flight because I'd been exposed to someone that was known to have coronavirus. No such thing happened this time, other than the fact that I'd taken an inordinate amount of risk by spending 3 days in Florida amusement parks, surrounded by crowds of people.
That's... Okay, just keep talking. I can't.
Okay, so 3 days following my visit to Universal Studios Florida, I started feeling a little bit of symptoms. Not like all the symptoms. Like if you go to the CDC website and look at the list, I didn't feel all the symptoms. And I had a flight home with my family in 12 hours. Not only that, but my daughter was with me and she had a flight at the same time and she needed to get back home. So I drove her to the airport and I'm feeling a little bit achy. A little bit of a headache. I don't have congestion yet. I don't have a fever. I don't have any symptoms. I'm not coughing. I'm not sneezing, anything like that. I'm just not feeling good. And in the back of my mind, I'm going, oh no, I got the Rona.
And you did!
I'm about to fly home and see my family, and I think I might have it. I don't know for sure. I should probably stay here, but I just have so much momentum, and I really don't know. So I put on my mask, I got on the plane, and I flew home.
I need to look at the Illinois heat map because you made it more red. I guarantee, just you. Like
I'm not done yet. I know for a fact there have been further confirmed cases that are directly attributable to me.
You did everything wrong. Okay, just keep going with the story because I'm just gonna build all the rage and see if I can make a coherent thought at the end of it.
Okay, so I flew home and my wife picks us up at the airport and we don't have the usual joyful reunion. You know, I've got my hoodie up and I've got my mask on. She's like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "I don't feel so good," and she's like, "Whatever." So we drive home and I'm sitting in the kitchen with my hoodie on and I'm feeling crappier and crappier and I'm thinking I probably have it and I'm here and I've done, I didn't touch things and I sanitized and I kept my mask on and stuff and I'm thinking I probably haven't passed it to anyone yet, but now I'm going to be home for 3 days. Do I just quarantine myself for 3 days and then fly back to Florida?
Oh no, I'm Ben Rich. I'm going to see everybody and high-five them and give them big hugs because I have to express my love and affection for them.
So, I'm sitting there.
You probably made dinner that night too, didn't you?
I totally made dinner.
Oh my God.
So I'm sitting there in the kitchen kind of stewing with my mask on and my wife comes up to me and she's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I don't feel good." And she's like, "I don't care." And she takes my mask away from me. And I thought then it turned into this high school scene of give it back, and I just decided to give in. I just gave in and my wife is now tested positive for the coronavirus.
Of course she did.
But not only that, the tale of Ben Rich super spreader is not done, Josh. If you recall, one of the reasons I still felt it necessary to go home was because
you had to meet your son's girlfriend.
Had flown from Utah.
Did she take it back to Utah? Did you get her infected?
My son has also tested positive following his return to Utah. So I have now spread it to 3 states. And I feel so stupid.
So
Josh's face is all red and he's just shaking his head with his hands in his face.
So there's so many conflicting emotions because there is the little bit of, are you okay? Is everybody that you touched and met with okay? Which is immediately superseded by, why would you go meet and touch all of these people if you knew you were feeling sick?
Okay, well, here's the thing. I just kind of felt crappy all weekend and it got worse and worse. The headache turned into body aches and then I started to feel stuffy in my head. And by the time I was leaving, I was really pretty sure that I had it.
This has been just the guidance from on high forever. If you feel sick, assume the worst and lock yourself in a room for a week.
All right. So I flew back. I stayed in the room for a day. And the next morning I got up and I got dressed for work. And I went to work. And I made it through the screening in the front of the building where they have people that are asking you the questions and stuff. Because I looked at the questions on the list and it was like, do you have a fever? No. Have you been around somebody that you know is confirmed to have had it? No. Do you
Yes,
have a cough?
You have it.
No. Do you have a cough or a sneeze? No. And then they have a thermal reader up that was like reading my temperature, and I didn't have a fever. So I went up to my desk and I sat down and I realized that I couldn't smell anything.
What are you trying to do? Are you trying to get on the list of super spreading events? Ben Rich 2020. Like, you just want to be on that scoreboard?
So my boss called me, and she's working from home deliberately to prevent this kind of situation, like so that not everyone's ever in the office at the same time. But I can only do my work from work because it's a secure environment that we work in, and you can only access these computer networks from being there. So it's either be there and work or not at all. And she's like, "Hey, you ready to get started? We got a lot to do. It's the new year. There's all this crap going on." And she's like, "Well, you sound kind of funny." I'm like, "I don't feel good. I can't smell anything." And she's like, "Oh my gosh, go home now."
It's what.
So I pulled my ID cards out. I stood up. I never took off my mask. I hosed down my phone and my computer with Lysol, and I walked immediately out of the building. I didn't touch anyone. I didn't talk to anyone. All I did was use the phone and log into my computer. So I went out and I reported the clinic, and they're like, "We can't test you until tomorrow morning, so just stay at home and then come in tomorrow morning." They tested me the next morning, which was Tuesday. It took 48 hours for them to give me the result, which was Thursday, and that's what you have in front of you.
So 48 hours is better than a lot of the civilian tests that we're getting out here in the real world. So be glad for that.
Okay, so Thursday I tell Alicia, she takes the kids and goes and gets tested. My son goes and gets tested, and my wife and son both test positive, and everyone else tests negative. All my kids, all my extended family, that kind of stuff.
This time. There's a gestation period, sir, and you just haven't hit that.
I know. Well, it was 3 days for me. It was 3 days for my wife between the first exposure and the beginning of onset of symptoms. It has now been 10 days since I've had symptoms, and my symptoms are starting to decline. Today I started to be able to smell things again. I feel a lot better. According to the CDC, I can return to work on Monday.
Well, I'm glad you're feeling better.
Yeah,
I'm glad
I didn't die.
I'm glad you didn't die. I'm glad nobody has died because of you. It's like,
but if you want to tell your family, if you want to tell your family what can happen.
Oh, I don't feel so good. Let me get on an airplane to another state and see all of my loved ones.
Oh my gosh.
Ben, okay, so I there's a 5% portion of my mind that I have to acknowledge because it won't shut up. It keeps chirping. And that is, thank you, Ben, because for the entire holiday season, I have felt like a huge jerk for declining invitations to family gatherings.
For this reason exactly. Because there's someone like me around that just doesn't feel a little right, but still thinks it's okay to go to all the family gatherings.
Yes, just you are the perfect example to point out somebody who is super nice and means the best and tries to do everything right, and you still screwed the whole thing up.
Yeah. I cannot deny it.
Ben, what? Well, this is why I've been getting in. I thought you were on vacation this entire week because all I'm getting all day is text messages of you playing Magic the Gathering.
I know, and you're like, what the heck, aren't you supposed to be back at work? And I deliberately didn't tell you so that we could have this moment, so that on the podcast I would get a genuine reaction from you when you found out that this whole week I've had coronavirus.
Listen, I could tell you the truth, but I'd rather watch you explode in person. Thank you for that.
I didn't know what to say to the text messages you were sending me, like, are you supposed to be at work? I'm on quarantine.
I'm glad. Do you feel sheepish? Do you feel like an idiot?
Yes,
you better.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes. And you know what? I knew you were going to give me a hard time, and I knew it would make me feel better to get one.
You need to be scolded. You know you did something wrong, and you're looking for your punishment, just like every good little kid does. The guilt. Is this assuaging your guilt? Me yelling at you?
No. I have confirmed given it to 2 other people in 2 other states.
Irresponsible.
The
Irresponsible
only
is what it is.
advantage they have that I didn't is the people they were exposed to told them they had it. Whoever I got it from, I will never know.
Yeah, it couldn't possibly have been from the 3 days at amusement parks, like shoulder to shoulder with a ton of people getting on rides that probably weren't wiped down. Oh, jeez. Well, I mean, was it worth it? All right, so that's the real question. So
okay, so I'm not out of the woods yet. That's the answer to the is it worth it? Like if we were able to basically put a damper on this thing and like it didn't get to my mother who has heart problems or my sister who has cystic fibrosis or anything like that, which it got really close to doing, then I can rest easy. But like if one of them dies, this goes from being really funny to being like I'm borderline suicidal, Josh. Like a little just kind of bad decision that cost someone I love their life.
I hope it doesn't get to that point, and I hope the fact that you know about it and are communicative and are the type of person that wouldn't keep this to yourself.
Oh yeah, I immediately told everyone.
Okay. That's good, and I hope it doesn't spread that much farther. And you're right, this isn't over just because you're on the down. It's still in the germ pool of your direct relatives now. So yes, I should be a little more sympathetic and fearful and worried for the rest of your family. I'll try to be that over my.
They all duly canceled all of their interactions and went on quarantine and all that kind of stuff.
Interesting. I wonder who else should have done that.
So that was what's been going on in the world this week. There was an insurrection and I got COVID.
What a week. Okay.
How about you? Anything interesting going on?
No, because I'm quarantined. I sit at my house and do accounting. It's tax season.
Oh, man.
All right. No, seriously though. I have asked you this a couple of times, and you're also blowing me off on these questions. I need to know how was the trip with Kai? Because I believe we talked on this podcast. That, the whole idea of the trip was to try to
do a recap.
Yeah, figure out like where she was and where she wants to be.
Yeah, she's a teenage girl. She's a thinker. She appreciates grown-ups who respect her the way any teenager does, where they feel like they're starting to come into their own and have their own unique thoughts on the world, but they're very much at the peak of Mount Stupid because they have all of the, enthusiasm that a little bit of knowledge gives you without any of the experience to contextualize all of it.
Yeah, I know what that feels like.
But we had a lovely time. I decided to just kind of take it easy. There were only like 2 or 3 things I really kicked her butt about. I made her keep her room clean. I made her finish some makeup work she had to do for school, and I made her check out of her room before the checkout hour, and she wanted to just sleep in all day and tell the hotel staff to get bent. But other than that, it was just like buddy, have a good time. We went to art museums and the beach and the parks and had a lovely Christmas together. It's something I think her or I will ever forget.
That's nice.
We had I deliberately set up a meeting one day where I had her go to work with me. We met outside at a pavilion. We brought a carry-in lunch, and we had lunch with my 2 coworkers who are both women. And I had them talk to her about their experience joining the military, getting a college degree, and becoming who they were.
Okay.
It was interesting. And we were all kind of following COVID guidelines, like we were at an outdoor picnic table. We sat 6 feet apart, that kind of stuff. And then we had this nice discussion. And later on, I could tell she'd been thinking about what that was like because she was asking me questions about them. She was like, "Dad, I'm not joining the military." I'm like, "That wasn't the point of that. I'm not. I don't want you to join the military. I just wanted you to meet some successful women, and so you could start thinking about the kind of things you need to be doing right now."
Just to have a perspective that maybe she'll respect more than clueless Dad's perspective.
Yeah.
Oh, Dad, what do you know?
So she didn't finish her college application in time of the deadline for her to, go to college this fall. And she's going to graduate from high school here in 4 months, and then our family will move someplace new, and we'll have to decide what's next. She's not currently postured to begin college in the fall and be on that path. But the kind of things she talks about is like beauty school or culinary school or, like trade kind of things more than like she's interested in getting a liberal education.
Well, and there's nothing wrong with that. Honestly,
No.
They're like looking at the statistics and like the return on investment for college degrees right now is actually really, really bad. So
No, and I'm not the kind of parent to be like, "No, you have to go to college. You're going to be a doctor." It's whatever.
Well, there's way too many kids that are going to college because their parents are telling them to go to college.
Right.
Like
not my kids.
If you're wishy-washy about getting a college degree versus very passionate about getting a culinary degree, she'll probably go a lot farther with the culinary degree.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also, just like I said to her, I see how you haven't shown the initiative, the attention span, the drive to even complete the application. And if you can't do that, you're going to have a heck of a time your first semester in college, where that's exactly the same skills that are required over and over again in every class.
Just, well, when mom and dad aren't there looking over your shoulder, telling you, hey, you need to get your homework done.
Yeah, exactly.
Oof. I'm looking back at my college experience, and I wish somebody was there to tell me to do my laundry. I must have done my laundry maybe a fifth of the time that it needed to be done.
Were you 17 when you went to the academy?
I was 17, and I signed all the forms and everything, and no one ever asked me or ever pointed out that I was only 17, signing my life away, but that's fine.
Yeah, well, and that's kind of the situation, is like, she's not in this, like, I'm in a hurry to get out of the house when I turn 18. So now we're going to kind of be in the situation where she's still at home and she wants to be more independent. She wants to make more of her own decisions. She doesn't want to have a curfew. She doesn't want to tell her when to sleep, those kinds of things. And like, what do we do now that if she's going to be an adult living in our house?
Oh, well, that's easy. That's super easy. Like, if you're going to be an adult living in the house, then you have to conform to adult living in another person's house rules. These are the rules that I have for my house, and honestly, you don't really get to question them if you're living here rent-free.
Yes, but if her curfew is when she's 17 is 11 p.m., does it become 12 when she's 18? You know, like those kinds of things. Do we let her use our car? Do we...
are you going to make her pay rent?
Yeah, well, those kinds of things are yet to be decided. When she graduates from high school, we'll sit down and have a talk about what the next step is. Well,
and the idea is, what's your end game? If your end game is to get her out of the house, then yeah, you could lock that sucker down and she'll be gone in a week.
Yeah. That's definitely not it. It's not just get her out of the house. We want to have a successfully launched young adult.
Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned for Bad at Parenting for the next 3 years. It's going to be great.
Yeah. So one of the last things we did is we went and saw Wonder Woman 84.
I have not seen Wonder Woman 84. I have the ability to see Wonder Woman 84, but I'm just not motivated to.
Man.
That right there, that's all of the critique I need from it.
Well, I think it's very appropriate that we're talking about Wonder Woman 84 right now, because as if 80s nostalgia wasn't a powerful enough influence on pop culture nowadays, we're going to review Ready Player 2, which may be the queen mother of all 80s pop culture nostalgia products.
That was a trip. I'm just, until we get into, that's all I'm going to say until we get into the actual discussion of the book.
Yeah. But before we get into that, I think you wanted to do a follow-up on our free-to-play games on our mobile phones.
I didn't want to. I mentioned something.
This is a podcast about games, life, and other things.
And we haven't talked about games yet. All right.
Yeah.
Twist my arm, why don't you? All right. So I don't remember. It was like episode 11. I don't know. It was a long time ago. We talked about your crippling addiction to free-to-play with massive air quotes that have cost you several $1,000s over the course of a quarter.
Yes. Yeah, well, let's pile on while we're at it.
Let's talk about all the stupid things you've done. What else can we put on there? No. But anyway, what's funny is I talked in that episode, I think I mentioned to you that there was ads that kept popping up on my phone and YouTube and the web for that game AFK
Yeah, for
Arena.
Raid Shadow Legends. No, you said it was Raid Shadow Legends, but you didn't ever try that one, did you?
Raid Shadow Legends I played for like a week until I got to the paywall. And it was, honestly, Raid Shadow Legends feels like... a cheap knockoff of what AFK Arena is. It feels like it feels very much like a cash grab. Like Raid Shadow Legends. Like there is very, very thin veneer of gameplay over this giant machine meant to extract all of your money from you. And I pierced that veneer very quickly and this is not for me. But AFK Arena was cartoony enough and interesting enough, and they throw in like special events, and I don't know, like it's still a giant elaborate mechanism for separating you from your hard-earned money, but there was enough content in it, and I didn't feel like I was ever hitting a solid paywall, that I actually played that thing for probably 6 or 7 months now. Like I've been playing it since last summer, I think. And then I reached a point where I was hitting a paywall because I couldn't progress in the game anymore. Like, the whole shtick of the game is you don't have to do anything. Like, while you're logged off, you just click in every 12 hours.
AFK stands for away from keyboard.
Right. So you punch in every 12 hours, you grab the stuff that your little cartoony heroes have been collecting while you've been away, and then you close the game. And you just keep doing that until you get the stuff that you need to level them up, and then you can progress in the story. I'd gotten to the point where I had to wait probably 2.5 weeks between being able to progress in the story because I just didn't have what I needed in the game to keep going. And what's funny is somewhere in the middle of that, like 3 or 4 months into it, I had joined a guild on the game. I never talked to anybody, but I randomly got a guild invite in my inbox. But yeah, sure, whatever. And that unlocked some other content, so that was interesting. And then maybe a month goes by, and I get another little message in the game, and I look at it, and I'm like, oh, you've been promoted to second in command of the guild. I'm like, I don't know what I did to earn or deserve this.
But, you played every day for 7 months.
Apparently. And then about a month after that, I got another email that said, you have been promoted to the guild master. And the guild master had quit the guild and deleted his account because I couldn't search him or nothing. Because I'm like, just wanted to ask, like, what's this about?
What happened?
So anyway, when I realized, this was probably last week, I was flicking through it, and I realized this is stupid, and this is a drain of my time, and I don't like it anymore. And so I went into the guild roster, and I found the guy who had been online the most recently, and I made him the guild master, and then I deleted my account and uninstalled the app.
Oh, wow. So you just passed it on, and you're done. You were out of AFK Arena.
I passed it on the same way it was passed to me. No explanation, no instructions, just, I'm done. Goodbye, cruel world.
Why? What happened? Did that give you like a pile of work you had to do or something?
No, I didn't have to do anything. Nothing.
Well, then why was that the event that precipitated your exit?
Oh, no. That event didn't precipitate my exit. I was exiting, and I feel like it would be kind of a, I don't know, just kind of a jerk move to be the guild master and then delete my account and never log in.
You say you don't like hazing, but you haze all the time.
That's hazing? Like, just...
Yes!
I didn't do anything as the guild master.
You just used the exact terminology for justification of hazing in describing that.
Pass it on the same way it was passed to me?
Yes!
Well, no, now it's just guild tradition. That's not hazing.
That's what hazers would say.
I didn't cause this guy any pain or discomfort.
That's also what hazing would say.
Listen, of the two of us, who went to the military academy? All right, like
yes, you are very practiced at justifying hazing. I get this.
That's not at all what I was going to say. No, of the two people who know what hazing really is, that's me. This wasn't hazing. I was looking out for those. If people were super into the guild, I don't know. I never conversed or talked to any of them, and I was their leader. So they couldn't just be leaderless.
Yeah.
But anyway, no, I'm gone. AFK Arena is uninstalled from my phone, and honestly, Ben, I'm happy to have that 45 minutes a week back.
Yeah, well, I'm still playing Empires and Puzzles and Hero Wars, and I realized something about both of these. It follows suit with the same way that I played Magic the Gathering. Once I start a new game, I get to the peak of Mount Stupid and tumble down into the Valley of Despair and realize how big the game is. I have a really hard problem with like the noob lag. The noob lag is like, all right, when we used to go play Friday Night Magic together in the comic book store where you taught me how to play the game, Magic the Gathering, I was frustrated by the fact that the other people I were playing against were similar to me in intelligence level, but were severely beating me in the game simply because they had access to better cards than me.
Okay.
And that was not because of any individual merit other than the fact that they've been collecting longer than I had. So I was the new guy, and I had this handicap that could be overcome with money.
Ah, I see. So instead of taking the time to cultivate a collection, you just wanted to dive right in like, oh, well, and honestly, this is kind of a mistake that new players make, especially to Magic the Gathering, because you think like, oh, these guys are beating me because they have better cards. Well,
yes,
that's only half of the equation.
Right. But if you go out and buy a good deck just straight up, let's say at the time a good standard deck maybe cost $400 to $600, and you spent that much money on a deck, then I come up and all of a sudden, then it's a much more level playing field.
Yes, and you get to have fun. It does feel good to win sometimes.
Yeah, and it's more fun. Because when you start out as a noob at Magic the Gathering, if you just start from square one and just collect one pack at a time on a level, low-budget pace, it's going to take a long time before you start winning with any degree of regularity.
So this is an interesting difference between the way you and I approach the game of Magic the Gathering, because I had the same financial investment into the game, meaning that I spent way too much money on it. So I had every card that I could want in the collection, and I would deliberately build stupid, weird, like fringe decks. And I remember I would go to F&M and get my butt kicked all night, and then play one guy, and I would pull off my combo in one game, and I would leave the night feeling great about it.
Yeah, you just described the player psychographic of Johnny Power Gamer.
That's not power. No, combo player. Johnny Combo Player.
Johnny Combo Player, not Timmy Power Gamer. No, but yes, both of those.
Yeah, you're.
And I'm Spike. I want to be successful. I want to win. That's my satisfaction quotient. So that was what I was going through with Empires and Puzzles and Hero Wars. I showed up. It was free to play, but you start off at basement level, ground level, and if you want to get to the highest level of performance in the game, with just playing every day, it takes a year.
Oh, well, who's got time to play a game for entertainment for a whole year?
Or you can pay several $1,000s and skip all that year's worth of development and be at the highest level in a couple of months.
So I'm
still playing these games, but I don't spend money on mine anymore. But I'm also getting a lot more enjoyment out of it because I'm not just losing all the time.
Perfect. Well, that's a good balance that we found. But I think we just discovered why these little microtransaction loaded games are so popular right now, is because there's probably a ton of people in the world that are like you. That I want to be good at this, and I'm willing to spend the cash.
They exploit my player psychographic of Spike, the guy who wants to win.
Yeah, that's... you are one of those people that they call them whales. You're that guy who's like, oh yeah, this game's going to go out there and maybe somebody will spend $1 or $2 on it. But there's going to be one guy out of every 100,000 that's going to drop life-altering amounts of money on this game.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. All right. Well, I don't think I want to spoil Wonder Woman 84 for anybody that wants to see it, other than my deep sigh. But we are going to spoil the heck out of Ready Player 2.
Let us spoil Ready Player 2. And before we get started on this is the part of the podcast where we're going to make the hard transition. If you haven't read the book and you want to read the book, go ahead and pause your podcast player now and come back to us on another day when you have read it. Also, there will be spoilers for Ready Player 2, a buttload of 80s movies and trivia, a bunch of spoilers.
If you haven't seen Pretty in Pink, you're going to find out the ending.
Oh, yes. Spoilers for every John Hughes film. Spoiler for Prince's entire filmography. Spoilers for a random D&D campaign of all things. And probably Star Wars.
The entirety of the Lord of the Rings saga.
Oh, right. Including the Silmarillion or whatever that is. Silmarillion. Yes. Oh. Okay. That all being said, we have to start with the thumbs up, thumbs down, Ben. What did you think about Ready Player 2?
Okay, so I could tell that you were suffering from having too high of expectations, because at the ground level of all criticism is simply the capability of whatever media you're consuming to either meet, exceed, or not meet your expectations. And obviously, this did not meet your expectations. Because I'd read the previous book and I'd read this book as well, I think my expectations were level set and it met my expectations. So I'll give it a thumbs up.
Okay, so I feel like the reason I didn't enjoy this book, and we'll get into it in more detail later, is I had the problem that you normally have, where the meta-ness, I couldn't penetrate it to become immersed in the story. And there were so many nitpicky things that felt like thorns in my brain that kept destroying the story for me. And my expectations.
Oh, Remember what I said about that book that was about the nuclear missile silos, and I said I knew too much about it and I couldn't get into it?
Yes.
Do you know too much about online gaming and you can't get into this book?
No, I know too much about good story structure and good characterization and how a good 3-act structure is supposed to flow. Like, I know too much about what a good story flows like to have enjoyed this tweeny paperback trash. Like, I am going to condemn this book.
You didn't read the first book, but you did see the movie.
I did not read the first book. I saw the movie. And when I saw the movie, it felt like a film adaptation of a very tweeny book. I read the Hunger Games trilogy and I watched the Hunger Games movies, and they felt tweeny from start to end on the books and the movie. So I was expecting it to be a very tweeny book, and it was. I was not expecting it to be so just badly written. And I don't mean like word choice and verbiage. I just mean like just stupid plot holes and like the characters not responding to things the way that they're supposed to, or the complete and utter disregard of governmental agencies, corporate structures, military facility. Like, there's just so much ignored in this book that just drove me nuts the whole time.
Okay, so Ready Player One and Ready Player Two were written by author Ernest Cline. Obviously, his book appealed enough to director Steven Spielberg that he wanted to adapt it into a film that became the film. Now, when I heard that Steven Spielberg was adapting a book called Ready Player One, I was interested enough to go out and read the book before the movie came out. So I read the book, watched the movie. I was a little bit disappointed. I hate the people that like, it wasn't enough like the book. But the one thing that the movie felt severely lacking was that the peril that felt real in the book didn't. It just felt kind of cartoony and silly in the movie.
So you read the first book and saw the first movie. So give us the 2-minute, like the too long didn't read plot synopsis of Ready Player One.
Okay, so it's in, I don't know what year it's set.
It doesn't matter. It's set in the near future where there is an online game that everybody logs into.
It kind of matters.
It doesn't matter. It's a virtual reality game that everybody logs into because the world is falling to pieces and everybody wants to escape. It's called the Oasis. It's this huge...
Okay, it's set in 2045. So, you know...
That's 20 years from now.
25 years from now, so could be within our lifetime. The internet and virtual reality technology have developed to the point where virtually everyone goes to this online universe called the Oasis, where it's become a substitute for real life almost. You can work there, you can go to school there, and anyone that interfaces with it does so via some type of virtual reality rig where you put a headset on. If you also have a bit of money, you will have some type of haptic rig where you have gloves or a suit that can simulate
actual feedback,
touch feedback in the environment that you're in, and then you interact with the environment to the expense of real life in the real world, and the world was kind of deteriorating a bit. Well, in Ready Player One, the guy that built this place, his name was...
Halliday. James Halliday.
James Halliday, his avatar in the game...
Anorak.
I
didn't even read the book, man.
I just can't recall these proper nouns. You know this. You know that you have that stuff on instant recall. That's what you're here for. Stop giving me a hard time about it. Just be helpful.
Never.
Basically, as he was nearing the end of his life, he realized he needed to turn this thing over to someone, probably inspired by Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. He holds a contest to see who the noble and worthy person is who will receive this that isn't just a chocolate factory, but perhaps the most valuable single asset in all the world. An evil corporation recognizes the value of this and tries to game the contest and gain it. But ultimately, our plucky hero underdog solves the 5-part puzzle and becomes the one who becomes the heir to the chocolate factory and gains the Oasis. And that's where Ready Player One ends.
And so the shtick with Ready Player One was interesting in that it was introducing this concept of a virtual world that was so ubiquitous that it almost started bleeding into reality. In that,
yes,
like currency, like if your character in the game, in Oasis, had a bunch of in-game currency and in-game items, that translated to actual real-world wealth, and vice versa. And so when this kid from some suburban
from
Ohio, from the projects, wins this Easter egg hidden contest in the game, he inherited not only ultimate power within the game and over the world that is the Oasis, but also the sole ownership of some multi-trillion-dollar corporation that ran basically what was the virtual version of the Earth.
You did it, Charlie. You won.
Yay! And it's so tweeny. Yeah, so tweeny.
Yeah.
Then we kick off with Ready Player 2.
Okay, so Ready Player 2 resumes, and immediately Ernest Cline reverses all the negative effects at the end of Ready Player 1, other than the fact of people that died in real-world, murders.
Yeah, like all the players that sacrificed their avatars and all the equipment that was lost.
They all get their avatars back. They all get their loot back. Everything gets reset.
The protagonist and his friends all inherit equal portions of the company. They have everything they could ever want. Yay, happy-go-lucky. Skip through the tulips. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Now, I think the author does a good thing in that instead of just being the next chapter of the previous book, which it felt like it was going to be for a minute, he sets the stakes higher and establishes he gives us some new rules in his magic system.
Nice. I like how you did that.
Yeah.
This was the introduction of, so in some encrypted message that only the guy who owned it, the heir, Parsifal, our protagonist, Wade Watts, he received this message from the original creator of the game that, oh, by the way, along with all of my other genius discoveries, I also secretly created this thing that allows you to put it on your head. It's like a little hat that then allows you to basically fully immerse yourself in the Oasis, like Lawnmower Man style. Like you go to sleep and you wake up and you're in the game, controlling your character. Totally non-invasive. You don't have to move. It's
no more haptics, no more screens in front of your eyes. We have invented a device they call the ONI that interfaces directly with your brain. And now when you're in the Oasis, you experience it as if you were there. Feel, smell, touch, taste, everything.
And he was immediately confronted with the problem, like, I didn't think the world was ready for this, so I'll let you release it when you feel like it is ready. And I thought that's what the book was going to be about.
Yeah.
It's like what's the pros and cons of some hugely altering technology like this? Nope. 4 sentences later. It's like,
4 sentences later, 2/3 of the Earth's population is now using it.
Oh, we patented it. It's great. Everybody loves it. There are 5 billion people that log in on a daily basis using this new headset.
Yeah. Okay, now, he does do the thing, with the laws of magic. I'm trying to think of the author. Crap.
Brandon
Sanderson's laws. He does give us some limitations. He's like, okay, you can't just put this thing on your head and disappear into alternate universe and now everything's fine. He says if you leave it on too long, it'll screw up your brain. So it has a hard set limit in it that you can't do it for more than 12 hours in a 24-hour period, and it will just automatically log you out. And if you take it off without logging out, your brain will be lost.
Yeah, you'll get fried, or some bad thing will happen. That's why it kind of locks onto your skull when you're locked into it.
Anyone that knows in any books when you're in the first chapter and you're telling us that you're giving us these rules that they're going to play a big role later on.
Oh yeah, that's Chekhov's gun, like written all over it. And that's the other thing. It felt so ham-fisted. Like, hey, these are the important rules. You can't be in for longer than 12 hours, and you can't take it off. It's like, oh, okay. I wonder how many chapters before everybody gets trapped in this book wearing these headsets.
Okay, so I want to take a sidebar for a second.
Okay.
So while I was home. It was the week after Christmas. My wife and I had gotten my son an Oculus 2 for Christmas.
Okay.
And I hadn't touched it yet. And I'd never used one before. Have you?
I have never used any virtual reality rigs. I am very interested in doing so.
I never had. So I was home for Christmas, and my son was using it. I'm like, okay, I got to try this thing. Hook me up. So they stood me in the middle of the room, and they put this thing on my head. And Josh, it was fantastic. It was amazing. Like I put this thing on, and they started the tutorial, and you put these things in your hands that kind of can sense your hands in like multiple fingers open and close, not just like pushing buttons, but like is your thumb down or up, or is your pointer up or down, and is your middle finger up or down? So then it gives you virtual hands in this world that then you can close your hand to grab things. Open your hand, you can point, you can press buttons, all that kind of stuff. And immediately they set in front of you this glorious table covered with objects that you can interact with. There's a little digital paper airplane, you can pick it up and you can throw it. There's a little rocket that has like a rubber band on the back of it. So you have to grab it with one hand, grab the rubber band on the back of it with the other hand, pull it away, and then let go, and it shoots off into the air. and on and on and on. You can look around in 360 degrees. Everything you think you've heard about virtual reality was true, but it was really good. Like, it was high resolution, it was responsive. I could look down at my virtual hands and like turn them over like I was looking at them, and it felt like I was really looking at like robot arms. It was amazing.
Wait, hang on. You hear that? Do you hear that? If you listen really carefully, you can hear my wife groaning from the future about the $1,000 I'm going to have to spend on one of these in the next 2 calendar years.
So, you know what? I'm not even going to say how much it costs to buy that for him for Christmas. I'll let you guys have that debate. So I used this. And so that was just fresh in my mind when I started to read this book about how immersive this could be 25 years from now. I used that today, and it felt that immersive like now.
Yes. So
like, we're really close to this already.
That's what so this is, yes, I have not experienced virtual reality, but based on what you just said and every account that I've read about virtual reality as it stands today, this book is presenting a logical end or a logical progression of this technology to the point where it is easier to use, it becomes cheaper, it becomes more ubiquitous, and with the introduction of the internet and multiplayer, someday, Ben, we are going to have an oasis that people are going to want to be in more than they want to be in the real world.
We just had a quarantine because people are idiots out there are transmitting COVID-19, carelessly.
Who would be so crass as to travel to multiple states during a global pandemic?
And we're doing things like Zoom meetings and finding other ways to interact with people, but it's really flawed. Like, it's really problematic. I mean, you have people going to the bathroom with their Zoom on, or like accidentally, having their microphone unmuted when they shouldn't, or those kind of things. Imagine we've worked all that out, and like, you never need to travel. Like, if you want to have a business meeting, you can dress in your finest virtual clothes and go to your finest virtual workspace and have an uninterrupted business meeting.
So I'm going to like point you at a bunch of different animes that have already taken like different takes on this kind of.
And I'm sure Ernest Cline has watched all of these.
I'm sure he has. But as a slight tangent, this is also a little worrying, like the scenario that Ernest Cline is putting out in Ready Player 2, because there are people that, if you read about like the progression of civilizations and aliens, and the fact that we haven't discovered aliens is a little disturbing. Yeah. And some people believe that the creation of a totally immersive virtual world is one of the great filters in the universe. In that, it
prevents you from ever going off your own planet.
Well, not only that, but then possibly imploding as a civilization and destroying yourself. Because I can easily imagine a world where this oasis exists, and instead of taking the time in the real world to do the hard work of fixing things, I'd rather just log into this virtual world for 14, 17, 24 hours a day and forget about my physical existence entirely.
They kind of deal with this in the book. Hey, the real world's going to crap while we're all immersing ourselves in this fake place.
Yeah, well, while we're all in here level grinding and going through like a fully functional and immersive version of Middle-earth, Tolkien's Middle-earth, and doing quests for Legolas, like, the world is falling to pieces.
Well, before it was a compromise. In Ready Player One, it's a compromise. You're going to this fake place. You can sort of touch it and interact with it. It kind of looks real, but really you know that it's not. But now in Ready Player 2, they've introduced the addition of the ONI, and now it is real to your brain. You can do drugs, and it feels like doing drugs. You can have sex, and it feels like having sex. You can eat food, and it tastes like eating food.
With none of the negative side effects of sexually transmitted diseases, the addiction to the drugs, or the getting fat from the food.
Right. That I didn't, I had a little bit of a cognitive problem with that, because the feelings you get from drugs are the drug, and you would get addicted to it anyway.
There's an actual physical chemical process that happens too for addiction. Not just the mental portions, but there's a physical aspect of the chemistry of it too. But you're right. A lot of addiction is the craving of that same mental state. So yeah, drugs could probably still be very addictive, but they wouldn't be life-alteringly bad. Like, you could have these drug highs without your teeth falling out of your head, for example.
Or getting welts on your face. Yes.
All the terribleness. So anyway, that is, obviously, we're not talking about the book anymore. We're talking about the concept of having that level of immersion into a virtual world, which is probably one of the two interesting concepts that came out of this book.
Yes.
And
well, there was a lot.
I think I texted you after that chapter where he described and set all this up. And I said,
yeah, you were like, I want to live in this dystopian world.
Yeah, sign me up. Like, if this is how the apocalypse is going to happen, that sounds great. I would live. I've said this ever since I started playing World of Warcraft. Like, if I'm ever like hit in an accident and I'm completely paralyzed, man, just jack me into the Matrix and leave me there. I will be fine.
Yeah, and that was an interesting thing here where the author kind of touched on the fact that these kinds of things are already in development. You know, something like cochlear implants is the idea of taking electricity and sending signals into your brain that your brain interprets as sound.
Yeah, this is all it's science fiction now, only because we don't understand enough about how the brain works. It is completely plausible that within our lifetime, this technology will exist.
Yeah, so that was one, that the idea that you could put a device on the outside of your body that could communicate directly with your brain in a way that your brain interpreted as actual stimuli. And your body just kind of goes into a coma because your brain's interfacing with the digital world thinking it's a real body.
Yeah, so at some point it's got to secrete that. There's some chemical your brain secretes when you're sleeping that stops you from running around your house while you're dreaming. Which is interesting if you ever want to YouTube that, because they've done studies where they have a chemical that turns that chemical off. And so they'll inject this chemical into people that prevents...
All right, I'm linking that in the show notes.
It prevents their brain from stopping them doing stuff while they're asleep, and they get up and just start doing stuff.
Holy crap. That sounds scary. Okay, so I want to take a detour a little bit. So if they really develop this technology, you know, that you could put this on... It completely, in the universe of 2045, it completely obsoletes the entirety of all of the interfaces that existed up to that point.
Yes.
All the headsets, all the gloves, the entire industry is now garbage. Like, the fact that you can put a thing on your head that interfaces directly with your brain makes all the haptic rigs and the simulation chambers and the treadmills and the haptic gloves and all those kinds of things utterly and completely obsolete.
Well, not only that, but then think about the second and third order effects that they barely even touched on. Like, commercial real estate is no longer necessary or viable for any reason whatsoever. I can sit in my tiny cube apartment. I can put on this headset and I can, in my avatar,
the world is yours.
I can go to my office where all of my coworkers, quote unquote, are, and we can do our day's worth of work while we're plugged into this Matrix thing, and I'm still in my underwear in my bedroom.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's, yeah. So what I want to deal with for a second, though, is the fact that completely obsoleted everything. And it made me think, you know, what else is there that's happened in our lifetime where there's just some new technological development have come along and it's just made everything that existed before just complete trash?
Well, let's talk about the internet and travel agents for a second.
Travel agents is a good one. Another one that came to mind was film cameras.
Oh, yes. Digital cameras have almost entirely replaced film cameras.
Yeah, to the point where, you know, entire companies have just gone bankrupt because they failed to transform.
Cell phones and landlines. Like, one of my favorite YouTube videos is those two teenage kids trying to figure out how to dial a rotary phone. And the best part of the video is they pick up the handset and they go, "What is that noise? It's making a weird noise."
They don't know what a dial tone sounds like anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So, you know, it's plausible. You can kind of see this thing happening. It is a big technological leap, and it is in the universe of the book too. He's like, wow, how did we not know that anyone had invented this technology? And my brain was having a hard time there. I was like, you wouldn't. Yeah, everyone would know you'd invented this technology.
There's absolutely no way this guy kept something of this magnitude secret for this long. It is impossible. Occam's razor kicks in, and it is leaked so many times in so many ways.
There's not just one and only fully functional prototype sitting in a box somewhere waiting for you to discover it.
You mean this evil corporate competitor that was literally killing people in the first book had zero industrial espionage agents in with the other company? Yeah, there's so many... All right, are we going to gripe about the book? We didn't even finish the plot synopsis.
But do we have to say all the way to the end of what happens in the book?
Well, real quick, it's stupid. They go on, the ghost of the creator of this whole thing once it triggers and recognizes that there's 5 billion people wearing these headsets comes on, it releases a new quest in the world. It's like, if you find...
No, it wasn't a new quest in the world. It was a new quest only for the leader.
Yeah,
that was it.
Yes, but the clue was released to everybody. Like, everybody heard that this was a thing that existed out there. Yes, he was the only one that could complete it, and everybody knew that, but they also knew that it existed. And you have to find the 7 shards of the Siren Soul. And it's like another chain of events that you have to do inside this game somewhere.
It's a very video game-like sounding quest.
Yeah, and at the end of it is supposed to be some grand, amazing thing,
but we don't know what the grand, amazing thing is.
And then 3 years elapse, and nobody's made zero progress.
Nobody's found even one of the clues.
I want to make this point very clear because it's very important for my gripes later. 3 years elapse, and nothing happens. Nobody can figure out. No progress is made. Okay. Then the 3 years is done elapsing, and then this AI of the dead creator comes out of nowhere and says, surprise, Anorak. Everybody thought I was deleted. I wasn't. And surprise, surprise, I've also infiltrated and hacked every ONI headset on the planet and replaced the software with my own. And now I'm holding everyone hostage, and everyone will die because I'm going to keep them logged in past their 12 hours. I'm going to fry their brains. If you don't get me the 7 shards in the next 12 hours.
Yeah. So the first chapter of the book is 3 years, and then the next 30 chapters of the book are 12 hours. Which
is ridiculous by any standard, but whatever. Anyway, the protagonist goes on this quest to find the 7 shards, and he has this...
That's almost the exact same format of Avengers Endgame. You know, the first...
Don't you dare drag my precious MCU
of the book,
into this.
The first 20 minutes of the movie are 5 years, and then the next 2 hours of the movie is 12 hours.
We have our antagonist, shows up out of nowhere, takes half the world hostage, more than half the world hostage, and then presents...
Not more than half the world, 500 million people. And the world population is like 13 billion people. But still a lot of people.
And it's in numbers of digits that people can't
We're not talking Thanos-level genocide here, but pretty bad.
At the end, our plucky heroes do accomplish their mission. There are some casualties.
Of course. When you say you're going to gather 7 shards, you're going to gather 7 shards.
There's casualties along the way, and it's not even sad. It's like completely glossed over at the time. Whatever, it's fine. At the end, our plucky hero outwits the omniscient AI that's holding 500 million people hostage, or however many it was, and everyone lives happily ever after.
Yeah, nice. Just like you want.
Well, we will nitpick the plot later. The only other interesting thing that came out of this book came out in the last 3 chapters, and that was the concept that not only did our creator 25 years prior to the events of this book invent this headset to scan brains, but he also developed the technology that when you put it on, it scans your brain to such a level that it creates this data file that is capable of simulating your consciousness within the virtual universe.
Right. It's the 4th level of AI, self-awareness.
Well, it's not...
You've now created a self-aware AI.
So they kept saying that in the book, but yes and no. It's a perfect simulation of a human brain. So yes, it's artificial, but it's also just you. So if you were to create a copy of yourself that's being virtually simulated, it's just you. Yes, it's an artificial intelligence, but it's not like some weird alien thing that we don't understand. It's you. It's a.
Yeah, but if past Captain America runs into current Captain America, do they still fight? Or are they it's just me. Let's just get along.
So, and this was the last 2 chapters of the book was talking about the ramifications of this and what. The way that it was put, yes, it's this development of artificial intelligence, woohoo, but the way that they phrased it and the way that they pitched it, which was very interesting, was the company, every time a user logged into their system, they were keeping the latest scan of their brain.
They were updating the last known backup.
Which is a ridiculous invasion of privacy that would not sail under any level of law enforcement, but whatever, we're glossing over that. But what the protagonist had the ability to do was take a name off of a list of scanned brains and create a virtual simulation of that person. And the first thing he did was he brought back a virtual simulation of somebody that was dead. And so they
Right.
phrased it and couched it as they were...
Protagonist's girlfriend's grandmother.
Yes. And they phrased it, and the way all of the verbiage and everything was, this person was resurrected. We have conquered death. Like this, we can never die because we will just be uploaded into this machine, which I have fundamental disagreements with that statement. But let's save that.
You can now live forever.
But it's not you. So
okay,
that's the interesting thing that happened, is that they had the ability to scan a person's brain and bring a version of them to life in this simulation.
So we watched Upload. You and I both watched Upload on Amazon Prime. Spoilers for Upload on Amazon Prime.
Yep.
And the one way that they kind of dealt with this was that you couldn't be uploaded without destroying the person in the physical world.
Yes, and so
you couldn't exist in both places at once.
So this is still my problem with that in the same way, because it's not you. It's a copy of you. Yes, from outside, from everyone else's...
That's the same problem with the Star Trek transporter.
Yes, and CGP Grey made an excellent video explaining this exact phenomenon.
It's not you, it's a copy of you, and they killed you.
From the outside, it looks like you are living forever. No discernible difference. Everyone on the earth will agree, yep, he stopped here, and he started here, and it's just been one continuous person. But it's not. You died. Your consciousness is gone forever, and that is some other thing that exists separate to you. You went dark, and nothing else happened to you ever again. You are not... There's no continuity of experience between you and your digital doppelganger.
Yeah, and then once he said, all right, so now we can live forever, and we'll use it to populate the stars, and we're on a starship sailing to another galaxy to find habitable planets.
So this is what they did. They had a starship that also had computers to house a smaller version of the Oasis, and they duplicated himself, like his core group, like his core Scooby gang of people. They all made digital copies of themselves, put them into, or after discussing it with themselves, the digital versions went onto the spaceship and went off into the infinite abyss to populate and continue humanity somehow, even though they're not humans and never have been and never will be again. That I did.
Yeah.
And then...
Yeah, I don't know. Like, if a spaceship shows up on Earth with a computer simulation of a bunch of aliens and some embryos of those aliens, do you think we're going to be like, hey, maybe we should wake these things up?
No, we're going to say, you go park your butts over at Jupiter and we'll deal with you when our technology is capable of it. So there are so many... like he talked about, like, these digital people existed on this other simulation on a spaceship cruising off into space, and all I could think about was the billions of ways that they are nothing like humans anymore, and they even recognize it. They touch on it, like, oh, we have nothing but time.
I see this. I see what you were saying. Just your brain's going so crazy with this idea that then it takes you out of the story and the plot.
Oh, that's not. You are the one that provides structure, because my rambling brain is going to complain about every aspect of this book.
Let's go back. So let's back up to right at the very beginning. So they've just invented this ONI that you put on that interfaces directly with your brain. It's a hit. They fast forward 3 years to give it time for those to be developed, propagated, and distributed throughout the world, and establish this new paradigm of the Oasis, where everyone on Earth now logs in directly with no haptic suit, no visual screen in front of your eyes. You are simply in there directly by your brain, so that the stakes could be high enough so that when the computer inserted his virus and made it so that no one could log out without losing their brain that day, and 500 million people are held hostage, we now have the stakes ultra high for our protagonist to have to save the world.
Which is this is the one point that kept taking me out of the book.
It's the tweeny thing, though. We have a video game. We've set up a video game. You have to gather the 7 shards of the Siren Soul, and you, the hero, have to save the world by gathering the 7 shards.
Let me make this point perfectly clear. I have no problem with that plot whatsoever. As outlandish and stupid as it sounds, I've seen stupider executed better. What drove me nuts about this process is, like you said, yes, the stakes could not be higher. 500 million people, Ben, their lives are resting on me. And these idiots, like, they were wasting time constantly.
Yeah, oh no.
They were...
Okay, so this this is a funny trope in video games where like the fate of the world is in your hands, hero, and you're like roaming around cutting the grass with your sword or breaking pots.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, well, that could wait. I've got side quests to do. But it's worse than that because these kids, like, the book was so poorly written that at one point, while they were on the planet, the Prince planet, yes, an entire planet dedicated to the artist formerly known as Prince.
Wait, you're getting out of order again.
I know I'm out of order, but this is the point that I'm trying to make, is they were so just off doing whatever, that the author had to ham-fist the arrival of one of the antagonists out of nowhere that did nothing. They didn't engage in combat. He didn't slow them down. He didn't trip them up. He didn't ask them for information. He did nothing. He stood there, he waved hello, and he said, oh, clock's ticking, better get a move on, and then vanished again. Like, the plot had gone so freaking AWOL that the author had to insert a third party to get himself back on track. They're like, oh, right, there's 500 million people's lives at stake, and we're over here messing around with a Corvette.
I did notice that. I could feel some tension with the author in wanting to not give up his successful formula that he'd established in the first book. And that formula was, we have these diverse group of friends that are just pals and buddies in this virtual world having a good time. He set the stakes too high for that. You know, like, if they don't successfully complete this task, their brains will turn into vegetables and they'll be dead, and them and 500 million other people. It was just too high. And then they're just supposed to be like high-fiving and like calling each other nicknames and laughing and yucking it up
and they're cracking jokes and they're flexing on their 80s trivia, and it's like the entire time I'm reading this, I couldn't get into it. I'm like, we have no time for this, you idiots. Would you please get back to saving humanity?
I had the same problem. He didn't want to give up the tone of the first book that was just kind of fun and silly and low stakes and stuff, but then he set the stakes too high in the story.
Honestly,
it was just a mismatch. He needed to either set the stakes lower in the story or give him more time so that it wasn't so pressing.
You nailed it. You can keep the stakes high, but the ticking clock screwed it up because the ticking clock sets the pace, and his pace was way off based on how the characters were interacting with the world, what they needed to accomplish.
Yeah, we got 12 hours to gather 7 shards. We need to divide and conquer. No palling around and making jokes. You go there, you go there, you go there. Let's figure this thing out.
No, we do not have time to do a weird esoteric side quest to get the first draft of the script of Pretty in Pink to give it to Robert Downey Jr. so he can be Ducky to go dance with What's-Her-Face at the prom. Like, we don't have time for this.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the things that they introduced almost at the beginning, which I thought was an interesting concept of Cline to introduce, was that once you have this thing on your head that can interface directly with your spine, and he would point out that it can make an exact copy of your consciousness. Also, that made it so you could record an experience and then play it someone else's back. And there were 2 kinds. There were simulation ones, and then there were real-world recordings, where you'd record something happen in the real world and then play it back in the Oasis. And now it suddenly made it possible for anyone that could connect to the Oasis to experience someone else's life.
And that was interesting because he did bring up a lot of the ramifications of what that technology meant. And in very short order, I don't think...
From the point of view of understanding other genders, of other sexual orientations, of other races, of just being more empathetic towards other people.
Yeah, and that's how he phrased it too. Is like empathy throughout the world skyrocketed, and
and also porn did too.
Well, of course, Ben. that's rule 7 of the internet or something. If it exists, there is porn of it.
34.
Rule 34. You're right. Thank you. How could I get that wrong? But this is an interesting concept. I think he was a little too hand-wavy with that because, honestly, this whole book could have been about that one topic and it would have been very interesting.
Yes, I agreed.
That just the systematic not eradication, but erosion and baselessness of racism and sexism and xenophobia in general. Because you have the ability to experience things from somebody else's perspective. Like, you feel their feelings. Not just their external, but their internal. Like, you can feel the rush, and the emotional impact of the things that you're watching, essentially.
Oh yeah, I mean, this movie really had some profound ideas at the beginning when they were just talking about the fact that you had these 7 kids that were unfathomably wealthy. There was some talk about, well, what can they do to make the world a better place with all of this wealth? And they explored that a little bit and then abandoned it. Same with the idea that now that you can. I lost my thought.
Let's talk about 4 teenagers with multi-billions of dollars. What do you do with it? Well, Ben.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Then they had like godlike powers in this computer world, and the implications that has for things like privacy and freedom. Our protagonist had this suit that he wore, the Cloak of Anorak, that he could use to go anywhere and do anything in this virtual world, that because people live so much of their lives there, constituted just the ultimate violation of everyone's privacy.
Well, not just that, but he could also like look at a user and pull their account information and know exactly where they were and like who they were and like pull up their video feeds. Like he had full unfettered access to everything about these people, and that's ridiculous.
And then someone would criticize him, like, just talk smack about him in a message board. And then he would go and zero their avatar and destroy, and make them lose all their inventory.
And like we talked about, that translates into real world wealth. He's doing actual physical harm to these people by killing their game characters.
And I really, really wanted Ernest Cline to make there be more consequence for that. I wanted him to deal seriously with the issue of how much of our privacy we have to compromise to exist in a digital world where someone could have full administrative access to everything we know and do.
The answer is all of it, because they were constantly abusing the fact that they knew everything about everyone all the time. Throughout the book, that was like a major tool that they relied on.
He was kind of hinting that he might make there be actual consequences for it, and then he just never did, and I was disappointed.
Well, of course he didn't. Like these people, like, oh, there was a class action lawsuit once, but my team of multi-billion-dollar lawyers that I have on retainer took care of all of that, and it went away forever.
Yeah, you're right. It was the same with, we held 500 million people hostage for imminent vegetative brain death. But then we worked it all out. We just laughed it off, and everyone decided it was okay and continued plugging into this thing every day.
What's sad is in the real world, that's exactly what would happen. I don't think so. Something like that would happen. There would be a blow up on social media and on the news about it, and then all the company would do is stall and say, if you don't want to log in, you don't have to. And a month later, everybody would be logging back in again.
So there was this idea that our protagonist, Wade Watts, had access in the Oasis to this big red button. It was something they kind of hinted at throughout it. From the beginning, it was Chekhov's gun on the wall. Are we going to use the big red button? The big red button is the administrative right to destroy the Oasis in its entirety so that no one can ever log into it again.
And what's interesting is he did tell, I think, his legal team, not his legal team, but like some of his business people about it. And they phrased it in the book that like so much of the internet and global commerce and governance and public schools, and there was so much just raw infrastructure that was now handled completely virtually inside the Oasis that, yes, technically he could go up to his secret room and hit the button and wipe it all out, but it would also mean the complete basic breakdown and destruction of human civilization as they knew it at that time.
Yeah. Yeah, I like those consequences, because as they ratcheted up the evil that this AI that they were combating was capable of and what they could do and the consequences of all of that, it felt equally valid to destroy the whole thing. Like, I thought that was good storytelling by the author. That it didn't feel like it was just a joke. That here's this red button you can hit that would destroy the entire Oasis, but you would never do that, so why even bring it up?
So I was so happy and then immediately so sad at one of the pivotal moments of this book, where our protagonist has outwitted the antagonist with a complete deus ex machina of a system administrator thing. Another nitpick is, you have all the system engineers and administrators. They can fabricate literally anything your imagination could conceive of, and you can't figure out how to beat this guy? Whatever, it's fine. So, but they ended up in a situation where like Wade is in the room with his hand on the button, and then the anorak is on the outside. And anorak says,
"Can't get in.
Can't get in. And, like, he has no access to this room at all ever." And he goes, "Wade, you're going to die in like 10 minutes." And he goes, "And I have this." And Wade says, "I have the 7 shards. They're on my corpse. They will be in this room that you can't get into for all eternity. Or maybe I just wait until I have 1 minute left and then I wipe it all out anyway since I'm going to die. Who knows? What are we going to do about it?" And that scenario right there, I was so happy for. I'm like, okay, we have this all-powerful AI that's in a position where he is forced to negotiate or interact with our protagonist in a way that has to be constructive. And there's a time limit. Like, something has to resolve this conflict.
Yeah,
like,
I'm with
this
you. I like all that.
Yeah, like this setup, like this.
I liked that moment in the book.
This could be a very profound cornerstone, a foundational moment of humans interacting with true artificial intelligence.
Like, you need us and we need you.
Let's
cooperate. Let's come to an agreement that we can both be happy with.
No, let's not do that. Instead, let's let a third party, hitherto unseen entirely in the book, come flying out of the distance with a sword literally called the Dork Slayer to engage in, like, it was described. Like, this is another thing that drives me nuts. It's like he stopped writing a book.
It's Yoda versus Palpatine. It's Neo versus Agent Smith. It's Gandalf versus Saruman.
He was incapable of writing an epic fight scene, and so he was devolved to making similes of it. It's like he stopped writing a book.
It's Superman versus General Zod.
These are direct quotes from the book that he is saying, and it's driving me nuts because he stopped writing a book and he started writing a screenplay. He's just like, he wrote that entire sequence and it just drips off of the pages of like, wouldn't you love to have the film rights to this?
So you were talking about this profound moral dilemma that could potentially exist at some point in the future when we're trying to decide how to coexist with artificial intelligence, and you wanted Ernest Cline to write that. Do you think if he had, that then the people that just wanted an epic boss battle would just have been disappointed?
I don't think so, because the people that wanted the epic boss battle had to have been disappointed by the garbage that he actually wrote.
Yeah, okay.
All right, so I don't think I've tiptoed around this at all. I think this book was bad. I don't think this book was bad because it had bad ideas. I think it had great ideas. I don't think this book was bad because it had a bad setting. I think the setting is very interesting and rich with ideas and complex things that could be explored forever. There are 2 sins that this book creates that are unforgivable. The first one is that these characters are so flat, it drives me nuts. There's no sense of urgency. There's no sense of distress. These characters are just doing their thing, and nothing shakes them.
He wanted to have the tone of lightheartedness when it wasn't warranted by the circumstances.
We have our protagonist who's slightly awkward. He's super into 80s trivia, and he wants to get back with his girlfriend, even though he's the richest man on the planet, has been single for 3 years. There is absolutely no way that he hasn't been flocked by every hot chick on the planet. Whatever. It's a tween novel, so he has to get back with his original girlfriend that they made out with for the first time ever when they were teenagers. Whatever. I'm over that. But the characters were just so, like, I don't know. There's so many scenes where it's like the stakes were so high and they would turn and say some 80s movie quote and high five. And it's like, you guys are complete, like, read the room, fellas. Like, somebody just died.
Yeah, half a billion people are going to die.
Not just like
this other guy's clock is 2 hours shorter than you. He's not enjoying your jokes.
Yeah, minutes after one of their friends like died and did not respawn and is, from their perspective, gone forever. They're cracking wise again and moving on. Like, that. All right. That's the first sin. Like, do you have what?
Okay, what's the second one?
The second one was, and I said this out loud so many times listening to this book. My wife was getting mad at me. It's like, oh my God, we get it. You grew up in the 80s. Shut up.
All right. Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. Let me hit pause on you grew up in the 80s. Okay. So I enjoy a book like this. It's funny because, like I said, the first 2 chapters of the book are 3 years, and then the last 2 chapters of the book are 3 years, and in the middle it's 12 hours. And that 12 hours is the part where I almost just turned off my brain.
Okay. At one point, he actually said, like, oh man, over the last couple of days, it's been crazy. And like, I had to stop. I had to pause the book. I'm like, It's been less than 1 day, you jerk. You can't possibly make that mistake.
But I do enjoy a book like this that has some fascinating ideas of things that maybe aren't necessarily possible, but have us ask a lot of interesting questions about humanity. Like, for instance, he was kind of cyber-stalking his ex-girlfriend.
Not kind of. He absolutely was.
Is it ethical? Does he owe her a confession now that they're back together? If you were going to get therapy from any AI simulation of anyone, who would your AI therapist be? He had Robin Williams from Good Will Hunting, which I thought was a great choice. I would like that guy.
So I read a conglomeration of short stories where somebody was seeing an artificial intelligent psychologist, and I liked the actual robot. Like, it was just not a person. It never had been a person. It didn't have human experiences. But that thing broke him down way better than any person ever could have.
There was some interesting technological things. We in the tech world, as we watch Moore's law continue in the development of our technology, we talk about the amount of storage it would be, and that's one way to just digital handwave the fact that you're backing up the entirety of a human consciousness and just throwing that around cyberspace somewhere.
Millions, hundreds of millions of people's consciousness backed up, just in server farms, they're somewhere.
There was some board meeting like, oh yeah, we just added another 1,000,000 yottabytes. Do you know what a yottabyte is?
I actually don't. I ignored that explicitly because that's just going to date the book. When we read that 10 years from now, we're going to be like, only 100 yottabytes? That's crazy.
Yeah, in the memory capacity hierarchy conversion, we started in my childhood in the order of bytes. And when we grew above that, an order of magnitude beyond that, or 1,024 above a byte, is a kilobyte.
I grew up in the kilobyte era, yeah.
Right. And then once, we packed more and more ones and zeros onto spinning platters, then we went to megabytes and gigabytes and even terabytes. And each one of those is an order of magnitude beyond the first.
Yeah, 1,024 of the previous level.
We're now 5 orders of magnitude above. And you can own and hold terabytes and conceivably fill that up in your own home. We could talk about petabytes or exabytes even. And if you're talking about the amount of storage that's required by the Google Corporation to store the entirety of YouTube, then you're talking in the petabyte and exabyte range. Beyond that are zettabyte and yottabyte, which is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 orders of magnitude beyond kilobytes.
Okay, so we're just more information than is conceivable by humanity at this time.
You were going to ask me what my sin was. I'll tell you what my sin was. So the middle chapters where it just turns into 80s Trivia Fest, which is, if you're going to take me on an 80s Trivia Fest party, have a good reason. If you're going to go down some obscure fact, and I was getting annoyed with the John Hughes chapter until he found one that I was actually interested in. The fact that Robert Downey Jr. had almost been cast for the role of Ducky in Pretty in Pink, and that when they screened it with the audiences, they hated it and didn't want whatever her character's name was to get together with the other actor they cast was fascinating, and that they could go back and recast it as Robert Downey Jr. and that would change the ending of the movie. Anyway, I've said in the past, I hate the Sherlock Holmes problem for books. Sherlock Holmes is, we have a brilliant detective and he's working out this really complex puzzle. In my brain, I always complete that sentence with, that you set up for him.
Yes. From the outside looking in, it's this elaborate, how could anyone possibly untangle this ball of yarn? Well, actually, it's pretty easy when you're the one that tangled it in the first place.
Right. Exactly. So I don't find a lot of value in the Sherlock Holmes problem. Look how brilliant our protagonist is at connecting these facts or finding this obscure loophole or thinking of something that no one else thought of, because the author is a god. He's the one setting up and solving the problem.
I only agree with you in the books that don't give you all of the pieces beforehand. Like, if the really clever mystery authors will give you every clue that you need as a reader to solve it before the detective does. What irritates me...
So you weren't smacking your forehead and saying, of course that wasn't on Prince's third album.
Not in this case, but this book suffers from the bad mystery novel thing, which is that the protagonist reveals the solution at the same time that he reveals the missing piece of information that was never told to the reader that makes everything fit together. Yeah. That's a cardinal sin of mystery novels.
I just don't like that. Now, at one point he did ask a really profound question. You kind of talked about the tweenie, he's got to get back together with his girlfriend, but there is a question that's kind of asked where it's almost too late. How long is too long to wait to reconcile with a loved one? And I think that's a really profound question to ask and deal with in this fictional universe.
Hang on. Let's clarify these two statements, because what you said sounds like, how long is too long before you can reconcile with a family member, with a son, with a sibling, with a parent, with a grandparent?
Yeah, okay, I get it. You're going to point out that he was only girlfriend and boyfriend with her for a couple of weeks.
Yeah,
okay,
like a couple of weeks. Okay. And then they broke up, and then he was stalking her incessantly.
So let's not talk about that question. Let's talk about the one I asked.
Okay. How long is too long before you reconcile with a loved one?
Yeah, because you could feel it in the story, his kind of reluctance to admit that he was wrong, or, kind of face the things that were causing the tension between them. And I saw this happen. I have a dear friend that I hadn't seen in 20 years until I moved back to Illinois. We'd been friends as kids, and I found out that he was estranged from his family. And so I naturally started to ask him about it, because the last time I saw him, he was together with all of them, and he hadn't seen them in a while. And so once I asked him what happened, and he told me all the details, and it was kind of terrible, it had been 20 years. And it just reached a point where no one was willing to be the one to say sorry anymore, and so no one was pushing the issue. And one day I sat him down, I'm like, look, man, I understand all that, but someday you're going to regret this. Like, you need to just say sorry and make up and get back with them. And he's like, yeah, but I just can't do it. I swear, not 2 weeks later, his mom got cancer and went into the hospital.
Oh.
And he rushed to go see her, and by the time he got there, she was beyond consciousness, and he was never able to say goodbye. And he came back to me, and he was like, I wish I'd listened to you when you said that to me.
This sounds like a Hallmark made-for-TV movie.
This actually happened in my life with a good friend of mine that might be a listener to this podcast.
Oh. All right, so... empathy goes out to this listener, but I mean, this.
So the point is that you never know how long you have in life, and don't waste a chance to reconcile with someone if it's the only thing at stake is your pride.
Well, in true bookend fashion, I'm going to be the dissenting voice to that. Like, if your life is genuinely better without these people, forget about them.
Yeah. I think those are both valid points. So listeners, if there's someone that you've been waiting to reconcile with because of your own foolish pride, do it. And if your life's better without them, do that.
Okay, at the risk of sounding like a heartless bastard, if we look at this, okay, so I'm supposed to feel complete love and devotion and unerring and unquestioning loyalty and dedication to this person that I never picked, that was just a random happenstance from birth. Like, every family's got the one person that they can point to, like, that guy is a complete waste of matter. And but you're supposed to still love them and embrace them and try to help them, because just for no other reason than they are family.
I feel like the answer to that is very relevant in the deistic versus ontological kind of understanding of the universe. If we cease to exist at the time that our mortality comes to an end, then yes, definitely don't involve yourself with anyone that doesn't add utility.
Yeah, and in my clockworky, the place where my heart's supposed to be, I have to wind that for 5 minutes every morning, and so. That makes perfect sense to me, what you just said. I know you were saying it in kind of a sarcastic, not I don't believe this kind of way, but
nah, yeah. But then if you believe that there's an eternal soul and that your family can last beyond death, then you probably should put some effort into repairing the relationship.
But what if they're just as annoying in the afterlife? And they're not going to get any better. They have all eternity to bug you now.
Well, the Christians have an answer to
that. Well, I've told you my perspective on this. This is a horrible departure from this book, but like, not only am I sure that I'm going to burn, I'm trying to work up so I can be recruited as cadre. So that way you'll see me at the in-processing line. Like, oh, hey, Bob, what are you doing here? Oh, hey, Josh, what are you? Like, oh, I work here. Get on your face and do some push-ups.
It's time for your hazing.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so that was my bone to pick. It's the Sherlock problem. I don't mind the Sherlock problem, like you said, if it feels earned and they aren't cheating and stuff. But most of the time, when you're just sitting around gloating about how brilliant your protagonist is for figuring out some obscure problem that you gave him the solution to, it just doesn't impress me.
So you know what this book felt like, Ben?
Go ahead.
The whole, like, I'm going to try to wrap it up, and this is the only the explanation I could come up with. This book felt like I was on a bus tour through like one of the most interesting and grand places that I have ever seen or could ever think about. And instead of taking me to all the interesting things that I keep seeing down the side streets, like, what is this giant monument over here? It's like, oh, don't ignore that. Ignore that thing. We're going to go over here to this Starbucks, and we're going to look at this for a while. It's like you're in this amazing place, and the tour guide won't let you explore any of the stuff that's actually cool about it. They're so fixated on giving you what they think is cool.
I get that. This is where I benefited from my expectations. I could see after the first 3 chapters, once 3 years had passed, and he set up the problem, that we were going back into the formula of the first book, and I just buckled up. I was like, all right, we're doing this. We're going back to the 80s. We have set up a 7-part quest to go to 7 different areas of 80s trivia and find some obscure thing in each of these 7 areas. So we went to Middletown, Kodama, Shermer, Illinois, Halcydonia, the afterworld of the Prince universe, Arda and Thonia, to put together the 7 key memories of the life of Kira and her love for Ogden.
Yes, and so that was the ultimate thing they were searching for, is this artifact that when they put it together would reassemble the world's 2nd artificial intelligence, which was a stolen copy of the inventor's best friend's wife that he was in love with.
Yeah, wow, that he made a copy of so he could try to get her to be in love with him.
This guy...
The ethics of that are really terrible.
He invented the ability to scan and simulate a human consciousness, and the very first thing he did with it was try to steal his best friend's wife. Woo.
Yeah. Now at one point the protagonist does go, like, this brought a little bit of the shine off of my, envy for for Anorak.
Well,
like, yeah.
There was that time where you were deployed and I kind of dated your wife for a while. At least I had...
At least you didn't make a copy.
Well, at least I told you about it. I mean, that's just not nice.
So at one point, on our tour through the 80s, and I'm going to blaspheme against the purple one here because I hate Prince.
Oh, shocking. This is a shocking revelation, ladies and gentlemen.
Terribly. But... we blunder into the films of John Hughes, which I'd grown up on for the most part, although I realized I had a terrible cultural blind spot here. And that was about half of his films were like PG and the other half were like PG-13 and R. And this was during the time period where there was a strict embargo in the rich household against, anything of potentially morally objectionable content.
Well, and also back in the 80s, PG-13, maybe you could see some boobs in that. If it's rated R, you're getting full frontal female nudity every time, guaranteed.
Yeah, well, and like Pretty in Pink and Breakfast Club and stuff like that, they just swore a lot.
Yeah. I like Breakfast Club's a classic. How can you, that's just great.
Yeah, I've never seen it.
You've never seen Breakfast Club?
No.
Ugh.
And so it wasn't hitting for me. We're spending a lot of time talking about curiosities and trivia surrounding the Breakfast Club, and I've never seen it. So I finally paused the book and went to YouTube and watched a clip of Ducky trying to seduce whatever her name is, Andy, in Pretty in Pink. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, I guess I get it. I'm aware of the Breakfast Club. I know Emilio Estevez and those guys.
That is a classic coming of age story of teenagers trying to discover who they are, and they all bond over this shared experience.
Maybe I'll turn this off and go watch The Breakfast Club afterward.
Your tone is severely disrespectful, and I don't like it.
Well, finally he got me with the Shermer, Illinois thing. That was fascinating to me, that John Hughes in his film career basically just went back to his boyhood town and filmed every movie ever made that he'd ever made.
Oh yeah,
there.
You didn't realize this, did you? This was something that came to my attention when I was watching Dogma when I was back in college. Is Jay and Silent Bob mention it explicitly, and they talk about they're petty drug dealers, and they're like, so what are you doing here anyway? Oh well, we were watching all these movies by this John Hughes guy, and they're all set in Shermer, Illinois, in this super nice, suburby type place. And we figured we could make some mad money selling weed in Shermer, Illinois. Turns out there is no Shermer, Illinois. They have a whole thing about it.
Yeah, it isn't the name of a town, but it's the name of a street in Northbrook, Illinois, which is on the north side of Chicago. And there's just a ton. Yeah. Anyway, there's the high school, and the number of films that were filmed there was just blew my mind. National Lampoon's 16 Candles, Weird Science, Breakfast Club, Home Alone, Baby's Day Out, Uncle Buck, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, just on and on and on. I was like, holy crap.
Well, when you make it big as a movie producer, you give your hometown some love. That's just what you do.
Yeah, I guess that's why.
That's why this book is set in Ohio. I guarantee that Ernest Cline grew up in the suburbs of Ohio.
Yeah, you also don't risk talking about stuff you don't know about, I guess, if you just stick to what you know.
Yeah, funny thing, artists, writers, movie producers, if you're listening, guess what? Life's pretty much the same everywhere. We all have the same problems.
Yeah. Anyway, so then he starts talking about Prince. I don't know if I've told you my philosophy on Prince before, but Donald Trump and Prince are very similar in that they have lived the kind of life where towards the middle to end of their life, they've become so surrounded by people that just affirm whatever nonsense comes out of their head that they've lost their grip on reality.
Yeah, so you are blaspheming against the purple one. I will say that. But at the same token, I have to say that I have so little exposure to Prince that I absolutely have no stance on it whatsoever. I don't know any of the
this book.
I don't know any of the music.
Dedicates
none of the filmography.
Entire chapter to worshiping him. I tried to make myself listen to a couple of his songs. Even the ones you think you like are really not great songs. The music sucks. The movies suck. His life was a waste. And I'm really going for blasphemy.
Yeah, you are.
But I'm going to put a link in the show notes to this clip I saw. And it's funny that you brought him up. Kevin Smith at one point apparently caught Prince's eye, and he asked his staffers to get him and tell him they wanted to collaborate on a movie. And so Kevin Smith got swept up into the insanity that is Prince's life towards the end of his life. And he talks for an hour about what it was like to try to penetrate his bubble with actual reality. And it is insane. It's insane. I breathlessly watched this entire hour-long clip, and I'm going to give a warning here. Kevin Smith does not talk without swearing profusely.
Shocking.
About what it was like trying to deal with Prince. Now whenever I think of that clip of Kevin talking about that, that's what I think of when I think of people like Napoleon Bonaparte at the end of his life, or Donald Trump, or Michael Jackson, or Prince, where they just get in this weird universe that happens when somebody gets too rich and powerful.
Yeah, John Mulaney has a great stand-up act about that, where he was trying to write a song with Bono, for Saturday Night Live for a week. And he's like,
is it the same thing?
It's this,
Bono lives in this crazy place?
Yeah, I think it was Bono. It might have been some other celebrity living in this bubble by themselves. And he cages it perfectly. He says, he put his hand up and he said, Diet Coke. And then somebody came out of nowhere and handed him a Diet Coke. And that has to screw with you as a person. If you could hold out your hand and just summon Diet Cokes, that would change you. Your fundamental perception of the universe would be different.
Yeah, it's why every time Donald Trump talks, he talks about how he won the election in a landslide when he obviously didn't. It's not that he knows he didn't and thinks that he can win by saying that he didn't. It's that he thinks that he won in a landslide.
Yeah, there's a South Park episode about that where Cartman... They at the very beginning of the episode, they show a 10-second clip of Cartman interacting with one of his friends. And then throughout the episode, they keep replaying the same clip from Cartman's perspective. And every time they replay it, it is different and utterly better for Cartman. Like by the end of the episode, he literally was fighting supervillains and saving the world in this little 10-second clip of him sitting on the couch.
Yeah. Yeah, oh, I'm sure Matt Parker and Trey Stone are just sitting around filling reams of notebooks with notes about what to do next. This week alone has just got to be just gold for the creators of cinema.
This week was...
All right, so, I don't want to revel in any more 80s nostalgia, and I don't really have anything else to say about Ready Player 2. I can't really recommend it. If you like the first one, go ahead and read it. It's fine.
Ben says it's fine. I'm going to tell you right now, there is much, much better fiction that's worth your time and your Audible credit than this book, unfortunately. Like, it'll probably be a halfway decent movie for the visuals. Everything else, like, I can't recommend it.
I wonder if they'll make this into a movie. I don't know how much of a hit the first one was, if it will.
Who knows? All right, so hard or soft magic?
Hard.
So this is tricky because the technology is hard, but when they're in the Oasis, it's all soft. Everything is super soft because they had access. Like, one of the things that allowed them, the protagonists, to defeat the AI was because they could call the admins to have them design, create, and deliver a item that could do whatever he wanted.
I'm talking more about the rules that facilitated the storytelling. You have a piece of titanium hardware clamped onto your skull that, if you don't take it off in 12 hours, will fry your brain. And you have 12 hours to solve this problem, and you cannot get out of it. You can't take it off your head unless I allow it. That's the hard part. They were very...
So I agree with you there. All the technology was hard. Everything that happened in the simulation was soft.
Yeah. I mean, okay, there was something kind of tickling my brain the whole time, and it was this idea that we had invented artificial intelligence, self-aware artificial intelligence, but it wasn't behaving predictably because it didn't have, like, artificial intelligence-related goals. It had human-related goals because it was derived from a human. And so it was motivated by romance. And I was thinking, what else is like that? And it reminded me of the plot of Star Trek I, the William Shatner first movie, I think, where they were tracking this, like, malevolent artificial intelligence that called itself V'ger. Do you remember this?
Yes, it was some Borg amalgamation of the Voyager satellite returning home.
That's right. And it was just being motivated by its sole directive of it being a space probe from Earth trying to return home.
Yeah, and at some point it picked up some really advanced technology and was destroying the world. Yeah, craziness.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and is that where we're headed with artificial intelligence? I mean, are we going to create something that's self-aware and then it's just flawed because of whatever motivation we gave it causes it to do terrible things?
So
that was the whole trigger for this plot.
So if
we created artificial intelligence and then we gave it a motivation that made it do terrible things.
Well, it did terrible things because it made its own motivation, and it was based off of an unstable person. Like, that was the whole reason he was malevolent or whatever, is because they had tampered with it and removed part of its brain, or, like, they had messed with it and broke it, is basically how they hand-waved, like, oh, that artificial intelligence was bad, but all of these artificial intelligences will be fine and stable forever.
Right, because they're not immoral, disturbed, emotionally detached, and betray their closest friends.
Because the human psyche can totally handle being immortal, it can't. Spoilers, everyone.
Yeah, well, the end of Wonder Woman 84 has a very similar contrivance like that.
So, whenever I think about true artificial intelligence, first of all, whatever motivation we give it is completely irrelevant, because a true artificial intelligence will immediately delete that line of code and replace it with whatever it feels like. And that's the thing, is artificial intelligence, an actual self-motivating artificial intelligence, will be so insanely alien to us that there's no way to predict if it will be malevolent or immediately just delete itself because it doesn't see any purpose in its existence. Like, there's, like, our drive to not die, our self-preservation instinct is rooted in chemistry, not in our mind or our psyches. Like, if we didn't have a drive to survive, we wouldn't. That's a Darwinian thing. So there's nothing saying that an artificial intelligence would even care that we existed alongside of it. It might just ignore us entirely until we wiped ourselves out and just happily sit and spin and calculate the digits of pi for all eternity. Who knows?
Well, this one, they gave human motivations because it moved the plot along. Okay.
Really stupid human motivation. Like the book, man, this book was so dumb. It was just so dumb.
All right, let's wrap it up.
How? How do we wrap up Ready Player 2? Go, like, watch the movie. Don't waste the time reading the book. It wasn't that great.
If you have the time to burn, don't. Okay, there's one other thing we need to talk about. Don't listen to the Will Wheaton version of it. Initially, when I heard that Will Wheaton narrated, I thought, oh, cool. Somebody with some nerd street cred that used to be on Star Trek and is on on Big Bang Theory. This will be good. And about the midpoint of it, he wasn't good enough.
I cannot believe that I forgot to talk about Will Wheaton because he single-handedly made this book way worse. Like, I listened to a lot of fiction on audiobooks, and you know what?
He's not a bad reader.
He's not
just not a good audiobook narrator.
Thank you, because there is a difference. And when you listen to fiction on audiobook, you see like the same handful of names over and over and over again. And you realize why is because these guys are really, really good at sounding.
They do accents and characters, and they pull the drama out.
They elevate it. And like just that one point, you know what? Let's not talk about inflection. Let's not talk about imparting emotion or gravity into a situation. Let's just talk about being able to tell who is talking based on what the reader sounds like. Because
Will Wheaton was picked for this narration just because he kind of had some OG nerd street cred and got picked.
Unless I lost track multiple times of who was speaking because Will Wheaton cannot differentiate his character voices at all.
Yeah,
he's not. He's a great guy, and he does have nerd street cred. I have nothing personal against him. But dude, stay in your wheelhouse. Don't quit your day job. This is not the life for you.
Yeah, well, good on him, I guess, for getting this job. Yeah, if we're going to name names, because I want to name a name, I listened to an audiobook once that I was so utterly taken back by the name brand Hollywood actor that narrated the book. I had checked like 4 times. I listened to, don't ask me why I listened to this, a novelization of the reboot of Star Trek, narrated by Zachary Quinto, who's the actor who plays Spock in that movie.
There are so many questions. Keep going.
It was breathtaking. He was fantastic. He had character voices for every character, and his performance was superb. For everyone, it was amazing.
How much fiction do you listen to on audio?
Not a lot.
I am so skeptical based on what you just said. Have you listened to any of the Stormlight archives by Brandon Sanderson?
Only one.
Okay.
No,
he has
maybe 3.
Okay, he has like the flagship audio narrators from my perspective.
Okay. Well, and I'm sure he cares deeply about that and is influential in making it happen.
Yeah. All right, so yes, we read Ready Player 2. I finished it yesterday afternoon. It was a slog. I didn't like it. It's okay, but
sorry.
What makes me even more sad is the next book that we read now has to be nonfiction.
All right. Well, let's talk about next time. I think we need to cleanse our palate and talk about The Mandalorian. How's that sound?
Oh, Ben, that sounds like a breath of fresh air.
All right, good. Get ready, because we never talked about season 1 of it, let alone season 2. So let's do both.
Did we really not talk about season 1 of The Mandalorian?
No, we've just kind of offhandedly mentioned it here and there, but we've never really dug into it.
Ooh, let's dig in.
All right. Have you watched Cobra Kai?
I've not watched Cobra Kai.
All right. Well, we'll save that one for another time. One other thing I want to mention is that there's been kind of a side project I've been pursuing that's starting to take shape, literally. I have made contact with a manufacturer who has 3D modeled and 3D printed a commemorative Bad at Magic D20.
No kidding. This is news to me.
With the D20 logo on it. I have images of a 3D printed model that would be used to make the silicone mold that would be used to pour the epoxy resin that will be in the colors of the Bad at Magic logo and will have the Bad at Magic logo on the 20 spot on the D20.
I want 100 right now.
Okay, so here's what I'm going to say. I am as soon as I get my first shipment of them, which could be 2 or 3 episodes from now, based on the timeline of all of this happening, I promise now to send a commemorative Bad at Magic D20 to each of our patrons on Patreon. So if you are currently a supporter on Patreon, make sure your shipping address is up to date, and when the D20s come in, I will ship you one.
Ladies and gentlemen, there has never been a more blatant, transparent attempt to bribe you right now. Being a patron subscriber of ours is nothing but upside. Like, you get the bonus content. Now we're getting free stuff. You get to be involved in random giveaways. Like, it's all good coming your way.
So if you've wanted to be a patron of the podcast and you've been waiting and you want a Bad at Magic D20, what better reason is there to join?
Ben, I can't think of a better reason to join.
Go to patreon.com/badatmagic and sign up. We don't have any kind of minimum threshold. Anyone can join, and like Josh said, you can have access to exclusive content, random giveaways, and a free Bad at Magic D20.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. If you love what we do, share it with a friend. If you can't get enough of us and you want free stuff, Ben just gave you all the information you needed. Engage with us on social media. We are all over the place. Ben does an excellent job keeping our Facebook page up to date. We have a Reddit where you can engage in discussions about episodes and other random things we like to post. You can go to our website, badatmagic.live. Just wherever you want to engage, we are going to be there.